We recently compiled summertime recipes into a blog post over on farmhousehomeboon.com, and today I want to take you through some of those and talk about cooking during the summertime, but then also year-round, kind of talking through how to get meals on the table without a lot of stress, without a lot of meal planning. So though we have all of these recipes over on the Farmhouse Homeboon blog, and I will definitely link them below, I love to think of recipes as a guideline. I remember when I first started cooking, I wanted to look through the pantry, look through the fridge, if I didn't have Google at that time, but find a recipe, or, in today's terms, put it into Google, put it into AI, which I definitely didn't have when I first started cooking, and seeing what they could come up with, what recipe matched my ingredients. But I found that over the years, cooking has become a lot more intuitive to me. It's not something that has a lot of rules. If you know some basic things, you can get food on the table with what you have. You can eliminate a lot of things and the recipes still turn out delicious. So now I can usually look into my fridge, freezer, pantry and see what I can make, as opposed to trying to do that in reverse, do that the other way. And I think that's the goal for mealtime, to not be something where you need to read every recipe to the letter and make cooking more complicated than it needs to be. And throughout this video, you are going to see a lot of times where I don't make the recipe exactly as it calls for, because a lot of times I just don't have a certain something. Like maybe I ran out of cumin, but I still have chili powder. I know that the recipe will still taste just as good with just chili powder, maybe a little bit of paprika in there. In our kitchens, also, we tend to have certain things that we reach for over and over again to flavor recipes across a lot of different dishes. So in my house, I use a ton of chili powder and cumin. I'm almost always adding those to my grocery orders. I use a lot of Dijon mustard that works in so many different cases, a lot of Italian seasoning or herbes de Provence. So a lot of times if a recipe will call for thyme or oregano, and if I don't have that individual spice, I just pour in some herbes de Provence instead. I will use chili and cumin sometimes together, sometimes interchangeably, depending on what I have. If a recipe might call for sugar, but I only have honey, or if it calls for maple syrup, but I only have honey or sugar, or vice versa, or brown sugar, I will just pick the one that most closely matches that taste profile, and it totally turns out fine. So in today's case for stuffed peppers, if I only had, say, ground sausage instead of ground beef, I would use that. If I only had red onions instead of white onions, I would use that. If I only had mozzarella instead of Gruyere or cheddar, I would just use that. So like in today's case, I decided to use mozzarella because I had a lot more mozzarella on hand, and I'm kind of saving my cheddar until my next Azure order because I didn't quite get enough. So all recipes have that kind of flexibility. Also, in the case of stuffed peppers, quinoa works really great instead of white rice. Again, recipes are great for a guideline, or even just to give you the idea. Like looking through a list of recipes, like I have on my summer recipe blog post that has a list of a whole bunch of recipes, looking through those could spark your mind to think, oh, I have a lot of this other certain type of pepper. Maybe I will make some version and variety of that with the spices I have, with the vegetables I have. If I have a lot of canned diced tomatoes on hand, I can use that. If I have a lot of cherry tomatoes or other varieties of tomatoes in the garden, I can use that. I love looking through lists and recipes to give me the idea, and then just branch off from there with whatever I have, knowing that I don't have to follow all the rules or read it to the letter in order for it to turn out. I think this gives us a lot of freedom in the kitchen and can really save a lot of time. Our homeschool routine will be in full swing around here in a few weeks. I will miss the freedom of summer, but I always look forward to a little bit more structure and routine as the season approaches. We like to be involved in our children's education. Whether your kids go to school or are homeschooled, there are plenty of opportunities to be involved when they're home, and IXL is the perfect tool to do so. Thanks IXL for sponsoring today's video. IXL is an online learning program designed to help every child reach their potential no matter their level or skill. They offer interactive practice for math, science, language arts, and social studies. They offer clear explanations to help students correct mistakes so they can improve their skills and level up. There are lessons from pre-K all the way up to calculus, and everything is organized by grade, subject, and topic, making it super simple to find the support your child needs. One of my favorite features on IXL is recommendations. As your child practices, IXL recommends specific skills that will help your child build missing foundations questions or take the next step with what they've been learning. It is tailor-made for each student. I also love that IXL offers video tutorials made by educators that break down topics in ways that kids can easily understand. If, as a parent, you lack the confidence in a certain subject, the video tutorials really help break it down so both you and them understand. I also like that IXL has interactive games. These are a fun little break when learning new skills, and kids love them. Put math and language art skills to the test with puzzles, quests, and other games. It is important for us to be involved in our children's education, and IXL is a tool that can really help with this goal. IXL is offering Farmhouse on Boom viewers a 30% discount for the first year or the first month with my link in the description below. Again, thank you so much IXL for sponsoring today's video. Now the next recipe I am making, I love. I usually make it once or twice a year, usually around peach season, and when I make it, I always think we should make this way more often because it is just so flavorful. Again, I'm using some Dijon mustard to flavor the sauce. I also use very basic and simple ingredients because they are what I keep. So when I have a repertoire of recipes that have basic ingredients, I can almost always just make it or something very closely related to it with what I currently have, swapping in some seasonal things that are only available a certain time of year or are just more tasty in a certain time of year. I kind of gear our meal plans around that. So very basic, simple ingredients. I'm not usually having to go source anything weird and then throwing in some seasonal things. So right now with peaches being in season, this creamy peach chicken is a favorite of ours. I don't always pay very close attention to specific things that we have, and we had already used all of the cream on the top of all of the jars of milk because it is close to milk pickup day, but I'd already decided I was going to make this today. I already had thawed out chicken. So I just used some milk instead of cream. It was so delicious. Not as creamy as it is when you use cream, of course, but still I was able to make that recipe pretty easily, swapping what we had, and the show went on. I think one way to keep meals very simple is to have categories of meals that you make that you can customize depending on the season or depending on what you have. So things like salads, and another would be soups. We have soups year round, and the way that we make those a summer dish is by putting in a lot of seasonally available vegetables, adding a lot of fresh herbs, ingredients that are only available this time of year. Now this soup I would make in the winter too, to be perfectly honest, but it is a wonderful soup for the summertime. This is a creamy Southwest chicken soup. So I got a bunch of chicken backs from my sister from her farm, and I made a massive pot of bone broth in the Instant Pot. I got it going yesterday, cooked it at high pressure for a couple of hours, then I let it sit on the warm function overnight. This morning it's ready to strain off. Usually I'll put it through a big like spaghetti strainer to get a lot of the bones and any little excess meat that was on it out. And then I'll put it through a fine mesh strainer. This just makes it more palatable, honestly, because there's always little bits of chicken and things in it. And I think it tastes a lot better and it's more appetizing when it's a nice, clear consistency. And so I always do that extra step in a funnel as I'm putting it into the half-gallon jars. So I will use a lot of that bone broth for soups in the next week, but for now I am making a creamy Southwest chicken soup. Now this recipe calls for room temperature cream cheese. This is a great way to make any soup creamy. I did not prepare ahead enough to have it room temperature, so I just cubed it, put it into a quart mason jar, added some broth to it, and gave it a quick spin with my immersion blender. This helps all of the cream cheese to be incorporated so I can easily pour it into my soup. I also, you may notice, did not have corn, and so this will not have corn in it, but the flavor is still all there. We have the fresh avocados to top it and fresh cilantro. I should have chopped up some tomatoes because I do actually have some tomatoes from my sister's garden and forgot, but no worries, I will definitely use those later in the week. But that's why this is also a great soup for summertime. Usually access to fresh tomatoes is abundant. There's a lot of farm stands in our area. We don't have a garden this year, but we are able to come by fresh tomatoes, and they work really wonderfully in this delicious summer soup. Another thing I do to really simplify meals in our kitchen is I have certain staples that we just make over and over again that I know how to do. I don't have to look anything up. I'm very familiar with the process. That makes it super simple. So one would be bone broth. I have the process down for that. homemade yogurt. So we end up using homemade yogurt as sour cream. I use it in recipes in place of other things. It's just one of those staple things that we always have and we always have a ton of. So I tend to base a lot of meals around that. Another would be sourdough bread. Of course, we're always making bread in our home. So I have sourdough breadcrumbs. I have bread to serve with meals to kind of stretch the meal out. I always stock a lot of the same meats. So we buy our beef, our pork, our chicken in bulk typically. And those are kind of what we cycle between, what we use over and over again. I use a lot of ground meat just because it thaws quickly. I'm able to throw it in so many different recipes. So for example, this creamy soup would also be really good with ground beef. If I had the idea for some kind of creamy summer soup but didn't have any chicken, I would just make this with ground beef and throw in some cream cheese. Now we buy cream cheese in bulk as well. I have a drawer in my refrigerator with all different types of cheeses, and a lot of times I'll have like 10 blocks of high quality cream cheese because it does work so well in so many things like this creamy soup. And then I have options. So we could do like a beef and broccoli creamy soup and add cheese and cream cheese and milk if we have it, and homemade bone broth. Flavor it with some salt and pepper, just kind of basic things, but keeping yourself well stocked with those basics and essentials is so important to give yourself flexibility and options. That's what I always want. I want options. Thawed out meat, a well-stocked pantry, a well-stocked fridge gives me options. Now this soup I mostly made in the morning, and then we had some plans, so I let it simmer throughout the morning while we weren't there, and then when I came back, the chicken was super tender. I could pull it apart with a fork and then finish the soup off and put the toppings on. I love things that I can prep at least partially early in the morning so that if we're out and about, when we get home, it's not this like panic, what are we going to have for lunch? I usually know, oh, we're going to be gone until about lunchtime. So I want to make sure when we get home, I at least have something kind of thought out, whether that's even just some ground beef already thawed that I can make into a quick burger, or something partially started that time can do its work and make it tender, delicious. So like, for example, I keep a lot of roasts in our freezer, and if we're going to be busy, I will turn the oven on like 250. I'll sear the roast, add some broth or wine or both, salt, pepper, pop it in the oven at 200 degrees. And when we get home, if we're a little late, we have, nothing else, maybe I'll do chips and salsa or nachos with that beef, or if I have a little bit more time, maybe I will fry some potatoes up or make a mashed potato. But knowing that I have something going, whether it's in the crock pot, the Instant Pot, the oven on low and slow, really gives us so much freedom and flexibility. And a lot of things can be started in the morning or the night before, like in the case of bone broth, just making sure that it's available for you to have something to pull from. Another thing we love this time of year is burger bowls. I like it because people can customize it how they want it. So if you have a pickier child and all they want is ground beef and cheese, to me, that's fine. I'm not worried about that. That's high protein. That's going to fill them up and sustain them until the next meal. For those who want a little bit more variety, you can top it with onions and tomatoes and the special sauce and the pickles. A lot of kids like the pickles as well, but there's a lot of flexibility there. Now for the sauce, I am doing homemade mayo, barbecue sauce, and pickle juice. Now in the ground beef, you can add whatever flavor you want. If all you have is salt and pepper, that's perfectly flavorful as well. But for today, I'm doing paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, ketchup, a little Dijon mustard. Any kind of bowl in the summer is great. If they're more adventurous than some of the littler kids, sliced avocado is really good, shredded cheese. Another wonderful meal that can be customized depending on each person's taste preference is tacos. In any summer meal plan, you'd have to, of course, include tacos because fresh herbs are delicious in them, fresh summer vegetables. It's also great that you can prepare ahead of time. Today I'm making crock pot chicken tacos, and I'm going to get them going in my crock pot so that when we get home later this evening, they'll be ready to go because we have a busy day. I'm not going to be spending a whole lot of time in the kitchen, and that kind of just is summer, right? Keep things going so you always have something to pull from. I tell people I can't make too much food in my house. There's just no possible way that I could cook too much food that we wouldn't eat it. So I always know if I have a little extra time, Get something going. Get that meat out of the freezer to be thawed. Get sauerkraut in the jars so that it can be fermenting. Start another batch of yogurt. Get some meat into the crock pot or into the oven. At some point, there's going to be busy me who is going to be so thankful that that is done. So today we are going to have these crock pot chicken tacos. Simple seasonings. I'm using my favorites, cumin, chili powder, and paprika. I'm going to add some salsa and some tomatoes. I did not have a white onion, so this is what the recipe calls for, but red onion will work great. Right at that moment when I realize I'm running out of things, we'll add it to my grocery order, whether that's an Azure order or a Walmart pickup or an Instacart or Thrive Market. I do all of those things, but I make sure to kind of notice when something is getting low and then add it at that exact moment to keep me well stocked. Now I am making some homemade corn tortillas. We have this press from Hacienda and corn, and it's just so easy. It's equal parts corn and water, and then pop it in that press. It's honestly so fast. It's not something that causes a lot of extra stress at mealtime. I can make this quickly before a meal. So if I have this meat going in the crock pot, nice and tender, when it's mealtime, make some tortillas, serve these tacos with whatever we have, whether that's feta cheese. I love that on my tacos. Fresh cilantro, diced onions, whatever are your family favorites. It's a perfect meal for summertime. Well, I hope I gave you some ideas to make mealtime more simple, especially in the summertime when you probably have a lot of things going on. You can save those long days in the kitchen for when you have to be there. Those days are coming, and I'm reminding myself of that. So we're keeping it easy and fresh and keeping ourselves well stocked, our options open, making sure the family is fed, but we're still enjoying this beautiful time of year. Thank you so much for stopping by our farmhouse.